Hi, welcome to the Corner of Knit and Tea, episode 255. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffy K on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, and that's where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have a Ravelry store. No, I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my handspun yarns. And we have a Ravelry group called The Corner of Knit and Tea. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, November 18th, and wow, has it been a minute since I've talked to you. Pretty much directly after I talked to you last week, I got super sick. So, remember I said I had a bit of a sinus something and I was feeling a little cold and warm? Well, I ended up getting what I think is probably a touch of the flu. I did have a flu shot. But pretty much from the time I finished with you on Monday, I came down with a fever and had sweats and chills and fever for 5 days. And I could not do anything. I don't remember being that ill in my adult lifetime, or really in my lifetime. Because when I was a kid, even when I had a fever for a couple days, usually I was up and around again, and this just knocked my feet out from under me. I should say that, having a fever and chills and sweats is absolutely miserable. Luckily, that was kind of the only thing that was bothering me. There was no digestive. There was actually not even much respiratory until after the fever broke. But for 5 days, I pretty much slept. I couldn't work, I couldn't knit, I couldn't anything. And so I do not have a lot to show you today, except from the last couple days when I have picked things back up again. So a lot of today will be talking about aspirational knitting, and what I will be doing on my trip. So I hope, thank you for joining me today. I'm sorry to start out with a bit of a down note, and I hope that wherever you are happy and healthy and crafting. And if you can, avoid that one because it was not that much fun. I will say that after my fever broke on Friday, I got a little bit of a cold and a cough, and I'm still battling that, a little bit more in terms of respiratory symptoms. But I feel 110 times better. And I did do a full day of work today. Actually, I actually did a bit of work over the weekend, because I am getting ready to take off for the Thanksgiving holiday. I always go to California to be with my family, and we are leaving on Friday. So this actually is the last podcast that I will present to you without an interruption, because there will be an interruption the week that I am gone. I'm probably going to throw the camera in a bag and try and take it with me and talk to you while I am there, and traveling and whatnot, but I don't know exactly what's going on. And I am struggling to catch up because I did not anticipate having a full week of nothing. I've never taken a full week off of work for illness, nor have I taken a full week off of knitting. Well, I guess it was 5 days. But it was intense. And I am so grateful to be recovered and grateful to be back talking to you and thinking about knits again. And I will say it has been, in some ways, it has been a very good thing for me, because as you know, I always talk about how I say yes too much. And I had to get real last week about what I could and could not do before the end of the month, and cut some things. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, just about knowing your own limits. So, today I am drinking the Republic of Tea Mango Ceylon. It's a black tea. It is one of my favorites from them. Again, one of my favorite things about the Republic of Tea is if you sign up to receive their catalog, you get a free tea bag every few months when they send you a new catalog. And I get lots of tea that way, although I do buy from them as well, and I also use them. I put free Republic of Tea in packages that I send. So if you get a package from me, you will almost assuredly get some tea from them as well. So I'm drinking today in a mug that my aunt sent me. I do not know where it came from, but I do like it. And lots of tea with honey and lemon. And it's so funny because I was drinking that fennel and licorice last week, and little did I realize that I was prepping myself for being ill. Although I will say that I didn't drink a ton of tea while I was sick, mostly because I was so hot and cold. So I mostly just drank water like it was going out of style. I was so dehydrated that I actually had, like, when I would fall asleep, because I spent most of the day pretty much sleeping while I was feverish. And I kept having dreams that I was, like, stranded in the desert without water. I was so parched, and I would wake up and drink a whole cup of water. So, yeah, like I said, interesting experience. So let's talk about the knits. The only thing that I actually managed to knit last week between Monday and Friday was I finished Miles' mittens, and that's because I picked them back up on Friday, and I was doing a little bit better, and so I finished his mittens, which is great because he really this was the only pair of mittens I had knit for him this year. They match his hat. Both patterns are Antler by Tin Can Knits, and they are written, I know the hat is for free. I'm pretty sure the mitts are for free as well, but if not, I bought them in the past. I cannot remember. And I have knit them multiple times. They are written for worsted weight yarn, super simple cable pattern, and Tin Can Mitts patterns are just wonderfully sized. They are sized through baby, through toddler, child, and then adult, small, medium, and large, and sometimes they throw a teen in there, or maybe that's under adult small. So I knit the child size for Miles. I think he's probably kind of in the toddler size still because he has not grown as much. He just turned 3, but I went ahead and knit the child size so he could grow into them. And I don't think the thumbs are quite exactly the same on each mitten. I think one is slightly longer than the second, but we're going to ignore that and give them to him anyway, because his hands are still really tiny, so I think actually even these are going to be too big for him. So, and he got, of course, an I-cord on his mittens as well. So, that is pretty much the only thing that I finished this week while I was sick, and that's pretty pathetic because that's less than 100 yards. But Saturday and Sunday, I tried to make up for some of what I missed. So, I am working on the Onlay shawl, which is a sample for my friend Anne at Woolly Wonka Fibers. And it is a shawl of hers that she released in a magazine earlier this year. And I am re-knitting it, to be re-released, I believe in, January. And I am knitting it in a new to me yarn, which is Alpaca Lin from Raw Garn, and it is 48% baby alpaca, 8% wool, 44% linen, and it is fluffy and squishy and actually does not shed nearly as much as I thought it would. And it is a pretty lovely little yarn. So last week I showed you, I have been working on this for a bit. This is an alpaca beaded scarf, a lace and alpaca beaded scarf. I found the middle panel not challenging exactly, but I did have to pay attention because the middle panel is kind of it's a square, but it's knit in the round, and it's knit with lace and beads, and particularly with the fuzzy halo, it's a little hard to see what you're doing, and it was a lot of lace in one place, and I haven't done that much lace in recent past, so it was a little challenging, but I had gotten that done before I got sick, and then I had started to work on, basically you work on the center panel and then you work outwards on each side. And so I had knit the center panel, which I had showed you, and then last week I had just barely started into the light gray and into the second chart, which is kind of blossoms. And so I had been working on that, and on Saturday and Sunday what I did is I finished the blossoms, which get slightly closer together the further you go in, and then I switched to the final color and did the final 2 charts, which actually are quite lacy, although not super beaded. I don't know how much of this you can see super well, but this is the darkest gray, and so that finishes one side of the shawl. So that is one wing of the shawl, and then the centerpiece, and now I need to pick up back at the other side of center and then knit the wing out to this side. Now, of course, I had hoped to have this done before I left on vacation, and there is no way that is going to happen. My hope is that I can get through maybe this light gray section before I actually leave on vacation now, because I have a few more nights to work through it, and particularly in this section, there's quite a bit less beading than there was in this section, and so I can get through it pretty quickly, and it's also just one side rather than four, so because when I finished the square, I had over 300 stitches on my needles, and now I'm, in the 70s and 80s. So I don't want to give away too much of the secret sauce. The pattern is still available. You can purchase it now if you're interested in it, if you think it looks like something you'd like to knit. If you'd like to wait for it to be re-released with yarn specifications to knit it in the Rama Alpaca Lin so that it can be kind of ethereal and lacy, that again should come out in January. And again, I'll be working on the rest of this and trying to finish this up shortly after Christmas. This was one of those projects that luckily I did not have a hard and fast deadline on. It was my self-imposed deadline that I wanted to get it done before I left for Thanksgiving, and the designer was very understanding, especially since it won't release until January, so she basically said, take whatever you need. I am still going to try and get it off the books because I have other samples that are on the books, but like I said, luckily I have a little bit more time to spend with this one, so I can make sure that I do a really nice job with it. So I'm going to pick that back up and knit it again tonight. Again, not a ton of progress, but all of the progress that I made was this past weekend. So that is the entirety of my knitting progress to show you this time. So not terribly spectacular for myself, but what I could manage. I have not touched my NaNiSueMo at all. Sadly, I think that's probably going to be a casualty of this month and potentially not be finished in time for the end of the month. However, it is one of the projects that I am taking with me on my car trip. I haven't 100% decided on the alpaca lace. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to take it with me because I'm pretty sure I don't want to knit lace and beads on a trip. That said, if I can get it almost done, I might take it along and work on it in the evenings in the hotel room because it's really actually not as difficult as I thought, and the beads are fairly manageable. So I haven't decided if I'm taking that one with me yet, but hopefully by the next time I see you, that one will be basically done and ready to go back. So let's talk about dream knitting or what I'm taking with me. First of all, like I said, I will be taking my NaNiSueMo sweater with me. I hope to get as much done on it as possible, and I have two other things I would like to take with me. Part of what I decided I was just going to sort of nix in things is, remember I kept talking about all the extra things that I wanted to knit for the kids? Maybe some socks, and maybe some slippers, and maybe some of this, and maybe some of that, and maybe one more hat. And I just decided that for the most part, I am done for the kids for this Christmas. I give them their Christmas gifts when I see them at Thanksgiving, and unfortunately this year I just did not crank out as much as I could have. I think that's a combination of, yes, my being ill, but also my taking on a lot of sample knitting this year, so I just did not have as much time. Now, before I act like this is a travesty, each child is getting a couple hats, a pair of mittens. Each child has at least one pair of socks. I think one has one more hat and one has one more pair of socks. So they are covered, and of course Roxy has a scarf. But usually I knit a couple pairs of socks for them in addition to all their winter gear, and I did not get there this year. I decided that the last thing that I will knit for both children, and I'm going to take it with me on vacation because it will be, take it with me when I go because it will be super easy, is I'm going to knit each kid a pair of slippers. And because they are so small, I can get both slippers out of one skein, both pairs of slippers out of one skein of worsted weight. So I picked up at my friend Christine's sale. She had a sale last weekend that I went to before I got ill. And not this past weekend, the weekend before. And I got a skein of Treasured Warmth worsted weight from Treasure Goddess Yarns in Ghost Ship, which is this really dark gray colorway. And I cannot remember if I showed this to you last week. I know I had it last week when I podcasted and I was talking about it. Her Treasured Warmth worsted is lovely. I have knit the kids lots of things out of it before. I also knit the Undaunted hat out of her blue. But she does great semi-solids in the super squishy, superwash merino, washable base. So my plan is to knit both kids gray slippers, and then what I am going to do is I actually got I got this mini from her when she handed me this mini when I bought the gray. But I have a ton of other minis and leftovers of sock yarn. So my plan is to make each kid a set of, I think I did talk about this last week, a set of pom-poms to go on their slippers. When I was a kid, my grandmother had this slipper pattern, and what she used to do is she used to tell my mom to trace our feet on, like typing paper or tracing paper, and send her the traces, the outlines, and my mom would just mail them off to her in an envelope with a stamp, and we thought it was the cutest thing ever. And then my grandmother would knit up little pairs of slippers for us based on those little drawings, and they were always these kind of fun garter stitch slippers with we called them pupkis because we're Jewish and it's Yiddish and whatever, but with little pom-poms on them. So my plan is to make the pom-poms before I leave and make a different set of pom-poms for each kid, so that each kid can tell their slippers apart, and then go ahead and knit them some garter stitch slippers. And then what I usually do is I just go get some puffy paint at Michael's or Joann's. I think I have a bottle around the house somewhere. I'll have to see if I can find it. If not, I'll run out and grab another one. And then I just puffy paint on the bottom of the slippers so that they're a little sticky and they have a little traction with the floor, because otherwise these are super slippery on wood floors, which is what my sister has. So I have decided the 2 pairs of slippers are exactly what I am going to finish out the year with for the kids. So the pom-poms hopefully will get made tonight or in the next couple nights before we leave. I'll wind up this yarn and take it with me. The slipper pattern is super simple. I think it's called Simple Garter Stitch Slippers by Hannah Livonomy, I think. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. I will put it in the show notes, and I have knit them before. They're just garter stitch slippers that then you crochet a seam around to kind of seam them together, and then just around the top. Anyway, so my plan is to do that for each child. I should be able to do that easily in the car. My guess is each pair will take me an hour or two, if that, and so that will be kind of the final gift for the children this Christmas, and that will sort of allow me to close out that chapter in my book. I don't know whether I'm going to come home and knit them some socks in December, and then maybe send them some socks in January, February for like with their Valentine's Day package. I haven't decided yet. I think I'm just going to wait and see how I feel and where I get on all of my other samples. So that is one project I'm taking with me. My sweater is another. And the third is this project, which is another sample that I am knitting. I do knit a lot of samples for Zen Yarn Garden. I love working with their yarns, and I have had a lovely relationship with them. And so she is looking to do more shawls this spring. They're doing the stitches. They're doing well, they just did Stitches West, but they're doing Vogue Knitting Live, and they're doing a variety of retail shows next year, so she wants me to knit up a bunch of samples. So what she sent me this time is one of their Luxe cakes. These are 750 yards, 150 grams of their Serenity Silk Plus base, which is superwash merino, cashmere, and silk. It is absolutely luxurious. Let me open this, even though it will make the plastic. Basically, they used to sell these in blanks, but then they decided to wind them into cakes. So here it is. It is Zen Yarn Garden Serenity Silk. It is their Luxe Gradient Cake, and it is in the colorway Mishmash, which is blues and purples and pinks, and looks like this. So this one is destined to be a Free Your Fade shawl by Andrea Maury, who is Drea Renee Knits. Of course, she has the of all the faded series. She started with Find Your Fade, which is an enormous shawl that I have knit. She also has the Fade cardigan, the Comfort Fade Cardi, and then there is a pullover. She has a variety of fade projects. Her Free Your Fade project was actually written for 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn and approximately 1,000 yards. However, we're just going to go ahead and knit the pattern is customizable at sort of any length. And since I have about 750 yards of an absolutely luscious gradient here, again, merino cashmere silk, I am going to go ahead and knit that up into the Free Your Fade pattern, and we'll see how far I get. So that is a sample that I'm taking on the trip with me. I also have a couple other samples coming coming up with them that I will be knitting when I return home. So these are the my Nanny Swaymo sweater, this one, and the slippers are the three things that I'm taking with me to California next week. I figure that gives me a couple thousand yards of yarn to knit, which should be enough. Again, I might take my alpaca shawl, or I may throw one other, maybe just a quick hat project in there. I never want to run out of yarn. Not that I won't be near yarn stores, but I also do not need to buy any more yarn because I'm spending so much time knitting samples and other things this year that I'm barely having time to dig into my own stash. So the other thing it occurs to me I might take with me is I still have 3 skeins of Jamieson and Smith that I bought when I was in London at the beginning of the year, and it might be a nice bookend to the year. I was thinking about knitting the Boosta Beanie by Gudrun Johnson, which was designed for Shetland Wool Week several years ago, and I bought the 3 skeins of Jamieson when I was at Loop in London with a friend, and so I might take that, I might just throw that in the bag with me in case I have time to work on that. That would be more of an instant gratification project for me. So those are the knits. Let's talk about the spins. I talked to you last time about my process of sampling and all the things that I was thinking about doing, and of course a lot of that went out the window when I got sick. Not the methodology, not what I talked about, but I just didn't do very much of it. So actually what happened was right before I got sick, on the Monday evening, I guess I was still feeling a little wonky, but I decided to give it a try. And I sat down and spun a sample skein. And remember I told you a lot of what I was going to need to do was kind of figure out if I could spin the right thickness. And so I spun this tiny little sample skein, and it is super curly-cued because I have not mastered the art of spinning balanced singles without adding too much twist to them. But again, for this particular sampling, I was mostly looking to see what thickness I could spin. And so I spun this cute little skein, which is about half an ounce. I remember it's about like 12 grams. And I spun it up, and then what I did is I took it into the bathroom and I kind of roughed it up in the sink. So when you spin singles, a lot of times the way that people finish them is by fulling them or felting them slightly. And I think I've talked about this before. What you do is you spin your singles, theoretically without a lot of amount of extra twist, although I'm not very good at that, as you'll see. And then what you do is you finish them. Usually what happens is if you're applying your yarn, you ply it, and then you wash it to set the finish. And you just wash it normally in, tepid water, like lukewarm water, nothing too hot, nothing too cold, don't want to shock the wool, and you can add a little bit of wool wash. When you are finishing singles, a lot of times what people do is they do what's called fulling the singles, which is you actually want to try and felt them slightly. It makes them, it fluffs them up a little bit, and it makes them slightly more stable in a finished state. It doesn't felt them entirely. It just, I don't know how to describe it, but it just finishes them a little nicely and makes them a little bit fuller. And what you do is you do all the things that they tell you not to do when you don't want to actually felt a garment. So what you do is you alternate washing it in hot and cold water, and then you add some agitation. So mostly what I did was I dunked the skein in the sink, and I put on the hot water for a few minutes and squished and squeezed and kind of rubbed it against each other, and then I turned it off and I added cold water and squished and squeezed and rubbed it against each other, and I repeated that 2 or 3 times. Now there are some people who go full bore at it with a plunger and a bucket, and that is not anything I was in the mood to do or in the energy to do, but what I ended up with was, like I said, I'm hoping you can see this because my camera is blowing it out because it's white, but I'm hoping you can see this. What I ended up with was some nicely folded singles of this beautiful fiber. And as it turned out, I was a little bit light. This is probably somewhere between like a sport and DK weight, and I probably needed to be just a little bit heavier, but this was a good test for me to see how thick and thin I could spin and whether I could actually manage the fiber. It turned out the fiber was very, very easy to draft, and very easy to draft thickly just by sort of grabbing nice thicker clumps of the fiber. And also, even though it is a little bit thick and thin, it did not like clump together, so I didn't have the problem of like grabbing a huge clump of fiber and then having like nothing and getting wiry thin next, like when I would spin a real thick and thin, sort of an art yarn. So I washed it and I stretched it a little bit just to pull some of the coils out of it. You can still see some of them, but it'll be fine when it's knit with, especially for what it's being, it's gonna turn into chicken feathers, so it will be fine for what it's being knit with. And I was pretty pleased with my sample. So, a week goes by. A week in which I am definitely too ill to sit up and start thinking about how to spin. And so on Sunday, yesterday, I sat down at the wheel and decided that I needed to give it a go. So bearing this in mind and keeping this sample near me, knowing that this was a little bit too thin, I started to try and spin slightly thicker than this. And I did not create a control card in the way that I discussed. I did not actually pull yarn off and do it, but what I did was I kept stopping to check, and I kept stopping to check that what I was spinning was thicker than this sample, and also I kept holding it up against, they gave me a small knitted sample of the previous one that I'm trying to recreate, and so I was able to see that. And what I did was yesterday I actually spun my way through 7.5 ounces, so I've now basically spun 8 ounces here, but I spun my way through 7.5 ounces, and I managed to get a thicker yarn and then go ahead and give it a good fulling. And as you can see, this is what I have ended up with. I hope you can see this because I can't see the actual definition in the yarn because it's too close to the camera, but I'm hoping that it is focusing enough to show you. So this is a big dense skein, because remember what I'm spinning here for is thickness, and it's kind of interesting because the way the yarns were spun for them, they are super thick and dense yarns. They are not lofty and airy yarns, which, to be honest, if I were considering creating super thick yarns that I wanted to knit, say, in a sweater for myself, I think I would want to look at some woolen spinning, because it would make a lighter, airier garment. This is 800, I'm sorry. This is this is 7.5 ounces, and my guess is this is only 200 or 250 yards, which means it is super, super dense, even if it's not super, super thick. And so my goal is to spin another 8 ounces of this white the same way, and then spin the brown, probably a full pound of that the same way. So I am running behind. This is also on my list for tonight. As you might guess, I have a really big list for tonight, and I'm not going to get to all of it. But this is on my list. I'm hoping to actually, I'm thinking tonight I might spin some brown, because my hope is that because I am behind on this, which I am, I had hoped to be done with the spinning by this week. And actually, if I had spun all of last week, I probably would be. But since I am not, my plan is to spin some of the brown and have enough of the white and the brown that theoretically I could take some with me on my trip and start knitting and finish the spinning when I get home if I need to. So I need to actually contact them today about that. I have not been in contact with them since I got sick, but it is time for me to provide a check-in report. And so I want to sort of show them what I did here and then talk to them about what are the steps forward. So I did experiment, and I did experiment fairly successfully, I think. Like I said, there is a lot of twist in this yarn. You can see a lot of twisties because I did, well, okay, let me talk about a couple things that I did to my wheel. Not exhaustive, but a couple things that I did to my wheel are I backed off on the tension. Oh, let's talk about this. I ended up actually spinning this on the mini spinner, which I said I was not going to do, but I ended up doing it anyway because it was convenient and because, honestly, I didn't have the energy to bring out my treadle wheel and treadle at it, because this weekend, even though I was feeling much better, I was still pretty exhausted, and I wanted to make sure that I did not, overtax myself and risk a potential relapse, because I know the flu can be tricky like that, and I really do not want to be sick the week we travel and see my family. Also, total aside, nowhere good else to put this. So far, Wes has not caught it, so let's keep our fingers crossed that he does not. So I did spin this on my mini spinner, And what I did, I made two adjustments. One is that I backed off on the tension knob. Usually I have the tension knob set pretty high, and what the tension knob does is it causes the bobbin to pull the fiber a little bit more firmly onto the wheel. And you can set it to basically have no tension, in which case you are feeding all of the fiber onto the wheel, or you can crank the tension way up such that the wheel won't even function. But I usually have a fairly firm tension on it because I like a yarn with a tight twist. So I set my speed fairly high, so it's adding lots of twist, but I also let the take up be pretty high because I want the yarn to go onto the wheel and not end up completely over twisted. The faster you go and the more twist you add and the longer it takes for that yarn to go onto the bobbin, the more twist you're going to have in your yarn. And so the two things that you can control on the mini spinner, much as you can control on a treadle wheel, although slightly differently, are you can control the speed at which the flyer is rotating, so the speed at which your yarn is twisting, and then also the take-up, how quickly it's going onto the bobbin. So what I did was I eased off the take-up just a little bit so that it wasn't pulling it onto the bobbin like crazy. And then what I did is I eased the speed way down. So basically I was adding less twist to my singles and adding them to the bobbin. And actually I just realized that what I said, allowing more ease in the take-up didn't really make sense compared to what I said, because technically it would allow more twist, and probably I should add that back to the take-up because that might fix some of my unresolved twist issues. Hey, talking about this stuff is kind of cool. So basically what I did is I reduced my speed and I tried to draft pretty quickly, and so I was adding less twist to my singles as I was feeding them onto the wheel. Again, still it's terribly over twisted for singles. The other thing that I could probably do is I could probably go backwards and remove a little bit of the twist. But again, for this particular project, how I am knitting, I don't think it's actually going to be a problem that the singles are kind of over twisted because they're going to be knit they're just going to be knit in single row stripes, and I think it's going to be fine to work with. I think I just need to wind it off. So I think I'm doing fine. This one still needs to dry a little bit so I can measure it and see exactly how much I got. But my experiments at spinning thicker are a fair to middling success for what I need them for. I would say this isn't yarn certainly that I would put up in my shop, but I think I will be able to use this for what it is needed for, and based on I base that on the yarns that I have already used to knit for this company before. So that is 30 minutes in, and I am off to do a few more things, and my mother-in-law is coming into town tonight, so I need to do a quick cleanup of the house. And whew, so thank you for tuning in with me. I actually managed to talk for half an hour about a lot of nothing because I didn't do very much. As I said earlier in the episode, thank you for joining me. I hope wherever you are in the world, you are healthy. Please do not get anything that's going around. Stay healthy and enjoy your crafting and your holidays. Since I will not see you again before Thanksgiving, if you are American and you celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday, I hope you have a lovely, happy, healthy holiday with your family. I know I am looking forward to seeing mine. I saw my parents earlier this summer. I saw the children briefly in August, but this is several days of us together, so we can just have lots of fun and relax and not have to worry about squeezing everything into one day. I will attempt to record while I am away. Please remember that the gift along is still open. That is, if you are knitting something for someone, or you are crafting something for someone other than yourself, you are still welcome to enter it into the thread. The drawing for that won't be until the end of December, so you still have lots of time if you are busy crafting gifts this season. I hope you have a lovely 2 weeks until I see you again, and I will say until then, happy knitting, happy sipping, happy knitting, happy sit. Wow, I'm really having trouble here. Happy nipping, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and have a healthy and wonderful Thanksgiving. Bye.